Hey, fellow Patriots, I'm Bree.
And I'm Blaze. Some call me Pa. It has been said that we have 4 boxes to keep ourselves free. These are the soapbox, the ballot box, the jury box, and the ammo box.
And we are the 4th box. We are here to arm you with enough information, resources, and skills to take back your freedom, increase your self-sufficiency, and inspire you to join in the fight against tyranny.
Thomas Jefferson said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Thank you for joining us and for joining in this fight.
Welcome back to the 4th box. Okay, everybody, welcome back to another week at the 4th Box podcast. April 17th, already halfway through April. Can't believe we're in April at all, yet here we are. So thanks everybody who's been tagging along through the year with us. It's sure been an interesting one, and we're happy to be updating you every week with how we feel about all of the stuff going on in the world. So, Pops, welcome, another week. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great to have you back in country and joining us after the miserable tax day, coercion day, whatever you want to call it, beat into submission day recently passed. But we want to welcome all the friends and patriots that join us every week. It's my great pleasure, as I know it is with you, the same, an honor to be joining you tonight for, I believe, our 67th. Is that correct? 67th episode?
Sounds right to me, yeah.
Yeah, and it's especially meaningful tonight to mention the 4th Box studio, tucked safely away in our virtual Buckman Tavern, the place where patriots gather. And we are quickly approaching April 19th, the 250th anniversary of the shot heard around the world, which to me is like our real Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
And it was the start of the American Revolution. And that happened on the green, right in front of the original Buckman Tavern. So tonight, I raise my glass in salute to Captain John Parker and his fellow patriot militiamen who engaged British regulars 250 years ago on Saturday. And I know there is events up on the green. Great place to visit if anybody is up in that neck of the woods. They will have reenactments and so on as they have on the 100th, the 150th, and the 200th anniversary of this date. There'll be some of that going on. So I raise my glass to those folks, and I also raise my glass to those who continue to stand in defiance of the tyrannical, oppressive, weaponized government that we have. And I have some dear friends around the country who continue to do their best to stand in defiance, and I did so for a long time. I recently have pulled back on some of my activities, but to those who continue to stand, I salute thee. So cheers, and to John Parker and the militiamen on the Lexington Green 250 years ago.
Cheers. That's quite a thing to celebrate. It's unfortunate that I don't think that many people will even hear the name Patriots Day, to be honest.
Yeah, you're probably right. I think a lot of that stuff they've tried to wash away from the history books, and that's certainly a day that has been for a long time since I met on the Lexington Green back in 2009. I had the distinct pleasure and honor of meeting with Sheriff Richard Mack and many other great patriots, Stuart Rhodes with the Oath Keepers and others who were gathered up there on that day back in 2009. But anyway, my quote for tonight: "It is better to fight and fail than to sit idly while tyranny thrives." And I found this one especially appealing tonight because that comes from none other than Paul Revere, who, by the way, has a whole laundry list of great quotes, and I'm going to try to start using some of them. But Paul Revere, you may recall, in addition to others, was the writer who most oftentimes get credit for alerting the militiamen around Lexington and Concord based on their intelligence that the Brits were planning an operation into Lexington to try and snag a couple of people in Concord. They were trying to snag Sam Adams is one of the primary rabble rousers, and I'm forgetting the second person, but they were also there to try and get the gunpowder and the shot and the other things that the militiamen had been gathering in anticipation of what ended up happening the next day. So Paul Revere and others rode out that night through the neighborhoods up there around the Lexington area to alert the militiamen that they were coming. And you might remember the old story, one if by land, two if by sea. And that is in reference to the lanterns that were going to be lit in the steeple of the North Church so that the people could recognize which way the patrol was going to be moving into their area. So very, very interesting. There's some great stories related to that. Hopefully we'll touch on those a little bit tonight. But I found that quote especially meaningful coming from Paul Revere, who shares much of the accolades for the activities that were to follow up on the Lexington Green and other places.
Yeah.
So as we get prepared to move into tonight, story I did, as I mentioned earlier, we're in the week of April 15th, where we continue to be bludgeoned into complying with an unconstitutional and criminal income tax system. And I want to point out that I continue to hear, even up to today, there being discussions related to winding down the income tax and subsequently the IRS. And this has to do with the implementation of tariffs, which were primarily used as the income source for the federal government up until 1913. And of course, that we know is when income tax was rolled out and the Federal Reserve basically took over the Treasury for the United States and issued money at credit and all of the pain that has come along with that. So there's going to be a lot of lumps and bumps trying to wind that down because there's been people and generations that have become filthy rich by stealing from the many and giving to the few through this system that they've developed with the fiat currency and the income tax to support their thievery. So as you and I have talked often, we encourage you to contact everybody who is in public office, and you can call your congressman up through the Capitol switchboard. You can call your senators. You probably will not get to speak directly with them, but you can talk to a staffer. You can let them know that you are absolutely opposed to this criminal thievery that has been justified through their income tax, which, by the way, was never ratified by the appropriate number of states. So we encourage you. You can get on. You can email the White House. You can email your congresspeople, your senators, your state and local politicians to let them know about these things. And if there is enough of a groundswell, perhaps, we can get rid of this tyranny. It's simply there's no other word for it. And when you think about the stories of those people back in those days, the people that were prepared to stand and push back against the tyranny that was coming out of England, very much like today. In fact, I wanted to mention the Three Percenters, which is a group that also participated to a certain extent in the J6 thing and other events around the country that had to do with standing up in the face of tyranny. And part of the reason for that name is, there's a very small percentage of people that actually stood up in opposition to the tyranny that the people were living under. And I think it was very much similar to the way it is today. You have about a third of the people that are unhappy with conditions such as they are. You have a third that generally is going to go along because their bread is buttered by government programs and all of those things. And we've talked about them many times. So they're not going to speak out against. In fact, you'll hear them protesting and gathering in opposition to the Doge or government taking a look at itself and trying to cut out waste, fraud, and abuse. And the people that you hear standing in opposition to this very notion are mostly the people who are on the receiving end of the benefits that are being stolen from the rest of us and provided to them. But thirdly, there's a large segment of society, as there was back in those days, who is completely unaware that there is any kind of a problem. Now, back in those days, I would think it probably had to do with distance. You know, there were people that were out into the backcountry, into the woods, and there was very little word coming about what was going on in the Boston, Lexington area and along the eastern seaboard where these events were taking place. They simply didn't know. Communication was very sparse. It might take a week or two for those stories to make it out there. But by today's standard, I think it is all the mush that is spoon fed into people through the television, through social media, through other places where they are distracted and amused with the bread and circuses that are provided by all the big media outlets and so on. But I think the breakdown today is very similar to what it was back then. You have a third that don't even know there's a problem. You have a third that's opposed, but probably is not going to stand up. And then you probably have a third that's just willing to go along because that's where their bread gets buttered. So there's a very small slice of society that says this is wrong. We should be doing something about it. And they continue to push back in whatever ways they can. Give credit to those men. You know, I think it was some stories say 77, some say 80 militiamen. I'm sure there were women around in support. It does, from any of the stories that I'm able to pull up, it doesn't say that any were active on the green that morning, but about 100 redcoats came. And you might recall in those days, the military basically just marched up in formation, and some would kneel down and some would stand, and they'd fire off a volley at one another while they're standing out in the open.
Mm-hmm.
So the very first skirmish, at least from the historical recollections that you can find, appeared to be largely like that. There was a gathering of militiamen out in front or somewhere near the Buckman Tavern, and this group of about 100 redcoats approached, and both accounts give credit to both commanders, saying, do not fire unless fired upon." Somehow a round went off and the shooting began. And I think 7 or 8 militiamen were killed almost immediately on the green. And that is what is referred to the shot that nobody has claimed credit to, that initiated the volley that went back and forth with 7 or 8 militiamen going down. And I think a few of the redcoats, maybe one killed and several wounded. And that was the beginning and what is referred to as the shot heard round the world. And there's a lot of history that is able to be reviewed. And I always love this time of year to go back and reflect upon these events and think about the courage and the commitment to living free that those 77 or 80 men that appeared on the green that morning had. And that is precisely what we need in this country today, is those people that are willing to stand in open defiance against the tyranny that we are forced to live with. But
Yeah.
the story goes on from Lexington. The group was moving on toward Concord, where they believed the largest stash of military supplies. And I suppose that mainly had to do with gunpowder and steel shot ball that they were using in their muskets in those days. So they moved on to Concord, and the militiamen began firing the redcoats moved uh, toward Concord, and then as they moved back toward Boston, and the militiamen were coming from miles and miles around because the word was getting out through the neighborhoods and spreading out to more people who were recognized as part of their local militia, and they were rallying to the call of there being a conflict. So there were reinforcements being sent out from Boston that were the King's men, the Redcoats, the Englishmen, and there were militiamen gathering from the hills and around the countryside around, and the militiamen were sniping and firing upon the Redcoats as they moved into Concord, and then subsequently moved back toward Boston, and there were reinforcements being sent out to help that column get back in. But there is a tremendously uh, valuable story. I'm going to read some of it. We don't do much of this on here, but I want to read some of it. This is one of my favorite stories of all time.
Is this going to be a new story, or is this going to be a continuation of where you're just leaving off?
This is part of it. It is all part of that activity that we just described. I just described related to Lexington and Concord. So there was a gentleman by the name of Captain Samuel Whittemore or Whittemore. I'm not really sure the correct pronunciation. A 78-year-old American farmer became a legend on April 19th, 1775, when he was shot in the face by British soldiers, bayoneted at least 6 times, and clubbed in the head with the butts of their muskets. He was armed with a musket and a horse pistol. Some stories say 2 pistols. Whittemore had crouched behind a wall near his home as the British retreated to Boston through Menotomy, I guess is how it's said, which is now referred to as Cambridge. As a flank guard approached, he shot 2 soldiers dead and possibly killed 1 more. Inevitably, the Brits, the soldiers, discovered the old farmer and inflicted their wrath upon him, leaving him for dead. So this older gentleman, 78 years old as the accounts go, seen the column proceeding back past his place and was being fired upon, by the militiamen that were staying in the trees and behind stone walls and firing upon them, what became known as guerrilla warfare. And many of those tactics are commonplace today. But anyway, this old fella was behind the wall and he fired into the column as the story I just described. But it don't end there. And I'm going to continue on here. Certainly, we all would have nodded our heads in sympathy and forgiven Whittemore had he simply succumbed to the terrible injuries. However, in an epic demonstration of New England stubbornness, Whittemore refused to die. Instead, a doctor patched him up and he lived another 18 years.
Wow.
Though perhaps not in much comfort, as the British musket ball had torn away part of his face. He died in 1793 at the age of 96. Now, this particular individual, this is not only the only noteworthy thing that he had done. He had been involved in previous conflicts. He had been involved in public life in terms of being involved with city councils or whatever they called them during those days, the committees of correspondence and all of those things. He had been involved in previous wars, had been the rank of captain, which is why the story refers to him as such. But very, very involved and opposed to the Tea Act and the Stamp Act and all these other tyrannical things that the crown was placing upon the colonies, which really led to this thing. The Tea Party had already happened in the Boston Harbor. There was conflict was brewing, that the country was at ease, not at ease, but they were at unrest. And there was people all around the country who were feeling the oppression of the king. And and much like the reason that they left the homeland from, they were having things stolen from them at harvest season, and they were being taxed without being represented. And that's where the whole idea of taxation without representation come from, and that being part of the definition of tyranny. But this story, and I borrowed that history Um, I took that off of a story that I read every year as I go through the story of Lexington and Concord, and the history is so uh, impactful when you think about these folks that are just out there scratching out a living in a brand new country, having probably hewn up some kind of a shelter to live in and raise their family in, and do some subsistence farming and hunting and whatever. And of course, around the towns there were blacksmiths and seamstresses and people that did the other trades for barter and otherwise. But then to have things stolen from them and returned to the English crown. These people were over here living a hard scrabble life, trying to find a new way to get out from under this, and here it follows them over. And they had enough. And they stood shoulder to shoulder against the greatest military force on the face of the earth at that time. So I think the lessons for us here today, we have to simply stand. We as a country need to turn off the television set. We are having our hard earned labor stolen from us through an unconstitutional and criminal act called the income tax. We are having our our hard-earned labors paying for abortions, paying for people that are perfectly able-bodied to sit at home and do nothing, and we have tolerated it. And remember, we've often talked about you get what you tolerate and all of those things. Only we can stop the course we're on. And the longer we lay around, the more oppressive these acts are going to become. So these stories are so meaningful to me, so powerful. Like this Captain Samuel Whittemore, to go out there by himself and fire into a column. And I'm not suggesting anybody do anything like that. What I'm suggesting is we need to stand up. We need to take part in the preservation of the liberty that was won by these tremendously courageous people, and take that back and restore what was rightfully ours. That's what I hope this day. And April 19th has become such a big day to me. As I mentioned early on, this to me is the true Declaration of Independence. You know, it didn't come till a year and some months later when the writing and all of those, and it's a wonderful thing, the Declaration of Independence. But this action against the oppressive force was to me where we're declaring we are done. We are done. We're going to win for us what we deserve, and we're going to do it, and we're going to take these steps to provide that. This to me was the Declaration of Independence. This is the beginning of it all. But the great story. I would encourage anybody that has a few extra minutes on Saturday, April 19th, if you can find anything going on related to the reenactments up there, or at least pick up a book and read up on the battles of Lexington and Concord, and read up on Captain Samuel Whittemore. Great stories, and an inspiration, should be an inspiration to us all.
Yeah, and I think that's so much of what we need is inspiration. And I'm going to kind of go back and touch on a few of the things that you said, but early on, before sharing that last bit, you shared the concept of 3%ers and what a small number that is. Then it was a lot smaller because our population at the time was quite a bit less. But still, 3% of any number is not a very big amount. It's a very small fraction of the population and very much a minority. And when we think about America becoming America, it wasn't even, we were not a country, we were nothing, we were just runaways. We were just people that had escaped and were living off the land for the most part and just trying to get by, like you said. That was all we were at the time. And because of only 3% of the people living there during that time, it was enough to create the country that we know today. Like, the greatest experiment in freedom in the history of humanity was created because of 3% of the population's bravery and courage. So it doesn't take a very large amount of people, but it certainly takes commitment. And I think, like you said, the takeaway is courage and bravery. And those are skills. You're not necessarily born with courage and bravery. They're skills that you kind of have to self-teach. It's not like we live in a society that teaches you to be brave and bold and strong. That's the opposite of the society we live in. We live in a society that teaches you it's better to be weak, that it's better to be small, to put the weakest members of our society and our population on a platform while the strong members are viewed as toxic. Like, we live in the opposite of a society that encourages you to be brave and to stand fearlessly for what you believe in. And when we think about it this way, it should become so apparent that this was orchestrated, that they wanted us to not be a strong and brave and courageous people, because the people who are in government today, who are running the behind the scenes of the big media, they're doing the same things the king was doing then. They're stealing. So the way to keep that continuing, the way to keep their coffers full, is to make sure that there isn't a revival of brave and courageous 3%ers who stand up to try and stop them. Because then we'll be right back where we were then, where we're free again. And I think that's the other thing that's really important here when we think about the major differences between today and 250 years ago. Yes, we're lacking courage and bravery in this country. That's objectively true. But we've also never known freedom. The difference then was that they were people who ran from tyranny to find freedom, and they had it. They experienced it. They lived it. And so when it was stolen away from them again, they could feel the difference. Mm-hmm. It didn't sneak up on them over months and years and decades. It was very obvious that tyranny was creeping back in overnight. And they said, no, we got to do this the right way. We got to live the life that we wanted, that we built for ourselves, that we set out to, that we put our families' lives in danger to ultimately have. Like, we've sacrificed so much for freedom. We have it. We're going to make sure we get to keep it. But in today's world, we've never known that freedom. Our freedom has been gone for so long that no one in this country knows freedom. So how do we encourage people that we're not free and that we're fighting against tyranny when they don't know what freedom actually is? And I say they, but it's me too. It's you. It's all of us. Even the people who know that we're not free. None of us have experienced it. Mm-hmm. There hasn't been freedom in this country for hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important to remember that when we think about why people could do it then, but people can't do it today, because we don't have that motivation, because we don't necessarily feel this hard stomp of tyranny's boots on our neck, mm-hmm. even though we were born with the boot on our neck.
Mm-hmm. I think that is such a great analogy. And you made several points, but I want to focus on not recognizing that we have lost something. And I think that's probably the biggest contributing factor to why the majority of people are perfectly content. They believe they are free. Let's just, if you look at the education system, for example, and we've talked about this many times, and I think I have some information related to an 8th grade graduation test. And you can find this. And they see most college kids cannot pass that test today. But somehow we've convinced ourselves that we're much smarter and further along. So I think, to your point about not knowing, the reason most people don't stand up is they 100% believe they are free. They can all stand up and wave their red, white, and blue flag come Memorial Day, come 4th of July. They don't really remember what's being celebrated, especially on the 4th of July, but I would say Memorial Day, they don't either. It's a day off of work. We go get some beer and cook hamburgers and hot dogs, but how many are really remembering Memorial Day for what it was supposed to be? How many are really remembering Independence Day? And that's why I say, to me, April 19th is Independence Day, because that's when the gunshots rang out. And that's when they said, no, we're not losing this again. But to your point, we have been so conditioned, so propagandized. We are muttering along, accepting the crumbs that are being given to us and told that this is freedom, that we believe it. It's been so the simple thing that I love to say, I know you're going to remember it. The simple thing to measure freedom is free men don't need permits. A permit is asking for permission from somebody else. If you were free, do you need to ask somebody else permission? You can't put an addition on your house. You can't pave your driveway. You can't do anything without a permit today. That is not freedom, folks. And anybody that thinks it is part of the duped crowd that has allowed this continuation of oppression to move further and further and further upon us. Where, just remember this, I think Ben Franklin or one of them said, the more laws, the less the freedom. It's that simple. It is so simple when you think of it in those terms. And you listen to half of the garbage that's being talked about at the federal level. Let's talk about one of the things that's going on today, this past week. Big story. Oh, Harvard's in an uproar because the federal government's not going to take away the money that they give them, because they told them you were going to have to crack down on the anti-Semitism that takes place on a college campus,
You mean
or we're
Harvard?
going to at Harvard University.
Yeah.
So they're going to cut the funding if they don't cut out the. Well, first of all, who in the hell said that they could take anything out of my wallet and give it to Harvard, who's sitting on a $54 billion endowment fund? Who decided that my tax dollars should be going to this criminal enterprise or any other one? This is the nonsense that we have being foisted upon us, and nobody says a word. Nobody even recognizes this as being a problem, or so few people do. All of the major news outlets, they call themselves news outlets, they are all discussing this. Nobody is saying, who in the hell give Congress the right to take from me and give to Harvard or any other higher education
Yeah.
facility? That is not, there is no constitutional authority for that to steal from me and give to an already exuberantly wealthy organization. This is how far off the rails, to your point. People don't even recognize, well, Harvard's a great place. We should be supporting it. They don't need my tax dollars to support them, especially when they're going to promote Marxism and all the other things that I stand firmly opposed to. But this is the kind of thing, hey, folks can run down to the mall. They can stop on the way home, get a six-pack of beer, come home and put some silliness on the TV, and they believe that this is freedom. So this is how, your point about not knowing. We don't know. I have a pretty good feeling in my spirit what I want, and that is free men don't need permits, so nobody needs to ask me for anything. Anything. Anybody that asks me, let alone forcibly takes it from me, that is tyranny. If I got to go apply for a permit to put a deck on my back of my house, and I got to wait for somebody to grant me permission, I am not free.
Yeah.
And all the cops sitting out along the road who are handing out fines to people that created no victim. This is extortion. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. If you are a law enforcement man and you are out there handing out fines to the benefit of the jurisdiction you're working for, it has nothing to do with the oath you took. The oath you took was to preserve and defend the Constitution and the people that was there to protect. and you are not. You are the biggest oppressor. That is how far we've come. So, great point. The other thing, and I wanted to mention it, our good friend Denny, who we've had on several times now on the podcast with us, when we start having some of these discussions, he goes back to this statement, and I know you'll be familiar with it as well. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. We are in hard times. Just most of the folks don't even realize it yet because they can run off and they can drive the car they want or they can turn the TV on they want, but they don't realize the freedom that they were supposed to have and that they are missing. And your explanation about that is perfect. Most people don't even realize that they're missing freedom.
Yeah.
They think they really have it.
But the problem is that you can't fault those people because how are they supposed to know? How are they supposed to know when the education system tells them this is the freest country on earth? This is the richest country, the smartest country. We are number one in everything when that is absolutely a lie. Yet people still keep this up. They still try to convince the next generation that that's true, that we can't possibly be more free than we are right now. While in the same moments, more freedoms are being taken away every single day. And it's a good time to have this conversation because I just returned from a different country and you just returned from a different country. And we talk about this when we come back from international travel. We've talked about it with other people in our family. And the really screwed up thing is when you go to another country, you realize freedoms they have that we don't. And sure, there might be things that are different there. Maybe their healthcare system is a little messy. Not that ours isn't. Maybe they don't have guns, right? There's different things. It's different lacks of freedom. However, when you see things they can do that you can't hear, it means you don't have that freedom. And if we're the freest country on earth, then why are so many other countries allowed to do things that we're not allowed to do?
Very good point.
For an example, this is very simple. There aren't that many beaches in America that you can drink on without being harassed. That is something that is not really even in question in most other countries with shorelines. You're an adult, you're having an alcoholic beverage, who am I to stop you? That's not even a big one. And it's not like it's the kind of freedom that we're chasing. It's not like I'm like, I'm not going to be happy till I can drink on a beach in America. But the point is, when you go somewhere else and you see these things happen, again, another example, on the beach that I was just at, there were all sorts of women, just local women, setting up their massage tables in the morning, and you could just get a massage on the beach. Here, you have to have all sorts of certifications, and you need to have somebody come and inspect your space, and you need to pay a permit, and you need to pay a tax on the certification that you get, and then you also need to pay a tax to the government for the money that you make doing those massages. And it's like this thing goes on and on and on, and it's more than just thievery. It's racketeering. It's organized gang crime. And we just go along with it and we think it's freedom because mostly our streets are clean. Like, what? That's not freedom. Every single day we see more stuff on the news about, childhood vaccines. That's another big conversation right now. Like, this has been an ongoing issue, and it's become a lot more prevalent with RFK Jr. getting into the White House. And it's like, there are so many pushbacks, and most states can do just about whatever they want. Take your kids away if they feel like it. If you don't follow a vaccine regimen that someone created that isn't actually doing anything for your kid, but it is putting money in the pockets of the big pharma guys. Like, these are things that we just go along with. We go along, and we say, people don't know what freedom is. And they don't realize that those things are inherently not freedom. And I don't know how you take somebody who doesn't see that and make them see it. What I will say to those of you who are listening is congratulations. If you're listening to this podcast, you are part of the 3%. when it really comes down to it, we're probably not going to wake up that many people. We're probably not going to get that many people pulled into the 3%. We're
Mm-hmm.
just not. But we have to make sure that those who are engaged in this, who are aware of the things that are going on, who are actively trying, who are actively staying informed, we have to make sure that we all recognize what it took back then.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot give up on it even though it feels like there's not a solution, because if they were able to do those things that they did 250 years ago, sacrifice everything for freedom, then we should be able to do the same even if we don't know what freedom tastes and feels like.
Yeah, that was great. As you were discussing and talking about why people aren't recognizing it, it's propaganda. It's being told over and over and over and over again, as you mentioned, that this is the freest place on earth. You have so much freedom. You can go here, you can go there, you can do this, you can do that. But the little things that you mentioned that you can't do. And you know how they're remedied in this country? You know how you lost the freedom? If you cannot do something until you pay somebody else something.
Yep.
Now
Yep.
you know you have a freedom taken away from you. You can go hunting, but you first must take the hunter safety course and pay into the game commission. You must send in your license fee. You must report when and where and what you shot your animal with and all of these things. So we believe that we're free because we can go hunting. I believe we're not free because I have to ask somebody else permission to do it. And I'm not talking about the landowner. I'm talking about the state. If it takes money to remedy it, it is a stolen freedom. Money
Yep.
cannot buy it. It was stolen away, and we allow it by participating in this extortion and racketeering that you mentioned. That is exactly what it is. But to your point, the bigger point, we have been having this mush pounded into our heads for over 100 years that this is the greatest place on earth. We're the greatest country. You have the most freedom. You describe things that you bumped into just in the last few days, having just returned from being out of country and seeing. I was just a week and a half before that out of country and listening to people talk enviously about wishing they were here in America. And I'm telling them, man, you folks have it so much better than us, for simple little things like that that they can just do inherently. They're allowed to do it without having to go and beg for permission from somebody. And your point was well taken about many of these countries. They do not have the right to have a personal firearm and all those. So there are bits and pieces. But in this country, we are supposed to be the beacon for all to follow. We are supposed to be the height of liberty around the world. And look at what we have to do to be able to do anything. You got
Yep.
to get a permit for your car. You got to get inspected. You have to have insurance. You have to no that those are ways for somebody else to pick your pocket and make somebody else wealthy, taken from the many, providing from the few, just like it always was back in the old days with the king, taken from the many, given to the few. It's the same thing under a different cloak, and the only reason it continues today is because most of us are not recognizing that we've even lost anything.
Right.
But I can tell you, having had the wonderful experience of being able to share stories with Vietnam vets, Korean vets, World War II vets, and having been, on the burial detail, servicemen's detail for a long time, and had the very enormous privilege and honor to have shared a uniform and done a lot of funerals with these guys, and they were watching what was going on to our country and thinking about seeing their buddies dying on the beaches of Normandy or storming Iwo Jima and these other places, Sicily, seeing their buddies die because they wanted to preserve. And by the way, a lot of it was even gone by then.
Yeah.
But they were watching over the next 30, 40, 50 years that they may have lived after they returned from their service and seeing the continual loss of personal liberty in this country, and thinking about the friends that they lost on some godforsaken place. You know, you could feel the heart wrench coming from people that shared those experiences and knew we were losing it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's that motivation that people don't have. They can't look outside of such a short time frame. It's back to that instant gratification stuff. If it's not happening now, why bother? Why think about it? It's like you just don't have to look that far back to see how much has changed. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, everything that happened in COVID was not that long ago. Everything that happened after 9/11 was not that long ago. Look at the freedoms that slipped away then.
Yep.
The Patriot Act.
Yep.
Speaking of Patriots Day, how patriotic. And that's the thing, they can paint it and disguise it as being good and virtuous and safe. And that's always the thing. Tyranny always comes dressed in safety.
Mm-hmm.
It's to protect you. Just like, these simple things that we need a permit for here. Oh, well, you have to have a license if you want to bake bread in your home and sell it
Mm-hmm.
to anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, you can't drink raw milk. It's all safety, but it's not safety. It's because these are things that can't be regulated and the government can't cash in on.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said was so perfect that if you have to pay for it, it's not free.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's true anywhere. If you go to the grocery store, if you have to pay for it, that means it isn't free. That's just a true statement.
Mm-hmm.
Not free equals you pay for it. Well, that's how all of life works, it turns out. Like, that's a perfect way to describe it. If you can pay to remedy it, to solve it, to be allowed to do it, then it's not a freedom at
Mm-hmm.
all. At all. Think about getting a speeding ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you're not allowed to speed because I said so. But it's totally fine if you just send me a check for $200 in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yep.
What? And you've brought up, I think, way early. I don't think we've discussed crimes, like victimless crimes, since way early in this podcast. But that is very important here too, because if there's no victim, there's no crime. So any crime that doesn't have a victim is just, once again, a freedom they stole from you. Like,
Absolutely.
There's a million examples of this.
100%. Absolutely, without a doubt, 100%, which was exactly why I was disgusted with the whole notion of protecting and serving with the police uniform on while I am handing out tickets. And by the way, if you don't hand out enough of them to keep up with the rest of the boys in the group, then you're going to get to work Christmas Day and you'll work midnight on Thanksgiving. And this is the way they lean on you to make sure that you participate with what they have decided protecting and serving is. This is what we tolerate. It is so upside down. Most of the country's walking around with their head up the ass in front of them, not even recognizing that they have been, their whole livelihood has been stolen, their freedom has been stolen, let alone a third of their paycheck. So I think, to talk about that a little bit further, how did we get here? Why is this happening? When you see, I continue to believe that young people will be the way out of this. But what we might have to do is have an EMP or something go off so that shuts off all their stupid video games that they're sitting in a house, at 27 or 28 years old, sitting in their parents' basement playing video games. They're not even putting any bread on the table yet, nor will they likely be able to. They're not even interested in possibly going out and starting a life of their own. So if we can get people into this state of mind where they're just basically plodding along through life with no vision, no hope, and no freedom, and they're willing to stay there, you basically have created this mass of people that are solely dependent upon government. they will continue to put the people in office that will keep those things coming to them so that they can survive. And the rest of us that are plodding along paying for this all are getting weaker and fewer, and the whole thing's going to fall apart until someday there's going to be a Lexington Green. I hate to say it. At some point, there's going to be some small group of people that just says, I'm done being pushed. I'm probably going to live in chains or I'm going to die on this hill, but I'm going to choose not to live in chains. There is going to be some people that just absolutely will not allow themselves to be placed into that box. I'm not encouraging it. I am hoping and praying, and we are gathered here at this Fourth Box podcast in an effort to wake people up to what is coming. You can look back through the history books. It has gone on and on and on. And until you push back against the bully that has crowded you into a corner, taken everything that you had, and told you how you're going to live your life, until you push back, it's only going to continue to get worse. So,
Yeah.
this whole podcast, since we began, 16 months ago now, was in an effort to get people to recognize free men don't need permits. Free men don't pay taxes, unconstitutional criminal taxes that take your money and put it into all kind of things that you don't agree with. But it's happening. It's happening to all of us, and it will continue to happen until more of us, a hell of a lot more of us, stand up and say, we're done. We are done with this criminal thievery. I am done having what I could have shared with you guys, my children, or anybody else that I chose to, have it stolen away and somebody else decide where my hard-earned labors are going to be spent. That is the way people have to look at it. They can't be happy just because they can go out. They got enough money. They can buy their new car every couple of years, or they can buy a bigger TV set. That is not freedom, people.
Yeah.
Freedom is being able to do, like you said, go out on the beach and provide somebody a massage without somebody coming and saying you have to have a permit. How about this nonsense? And this happened probably 10, 12 years ago, maybe more, where some kids out on the street selling lemonade were shut down because they didn't have a permit. We have allowed this to happen. We have. Yet somehow we're pretending what we're handing off to the next generation is a preservation of what the blood of our forefathers won for us. It is not. If you can't take your child, a 3, 4, 5-year-old child, and have them set up a lemonade stand out on a corner of your property and catch some passerbys and provide for them a lemonade for a dollar. If you can't do that without a permit, people, you are living in a cage, and we have been living in a cage for a long time. We just don't realize it yet. It's hard to free fools from the chains they revere. That's a Voltaire quote. And another one that I had a very cool opportunity to visit the statue of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe while I was in Austria, who said, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those that falsely believe they are free. That's us. That is us. We falsely believe we are free. So guess what? We are hopelessly enslaved.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the entire point of what we wanted to do with this podcast, was just allow people the chance to see the cage. Like, it is shadowed by all of the distractions that are going on a revolving basis, but it is always there. And all it takes is to see it. And once again, it doesn't need to be that many people. 3% of us is not a lot. And I think there's probably more than 3% of us that are awake and engaged and aware and want to change something, but we just haven't figured out how to quite come together yet, because keeping us apart is a pretty big part of how this all works, how the tyrants stay in power, how tyranny continues. So finding a way to come together is so important, especially because you can't fight it on your own, and you won't. You'll never solve a single one of these problems. You keep saying free men don't need permits, and you're not really free if you have to go out and get a permit to go hunting. This is just an example, right? It doesn't mean I think you should go hunting without getting a hunting license, or fishing without getting a fishing license. It doesn't mean I think you're going to solve this problem if you decide not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you do. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to rat you out. But if you do it and you think that you're ending the issue, you're probably just going to end up with a fine. So
of course you will.
it's not the kind of thing that you fix that way. It's coming together with all of the hunting people in the area and saying, what do we do about this? Let's start meeting. Let's meet once a month. Let's do what the people of New York just taught us a couple weeks ago, the Right Thinkers Group. Get with the people who you know agree with you, set a time to start talking about the things that you don't like in your area, and maybe you're not going to fix it on a nationwide scale, but maybe in your county, you can find a way to get rid of one of these permits that you require. Probably not all of them, and probably not the whole state. But if you start with one thing and you start in a small area, you will be able to see that change happen. And that is the path out of this. We all do what we can in small numbers, in small spaces. And if we get enough of those numbers in enough spaces across the country, the problem solves itself. Look at what the boys just did in South Dakota. Few farmers sold some pies and stopped a multi-million-dollar industry from taking everything from thousands of people. That was less than 3%. And they changed the entire course of South Dakota's future.
Yep.
If we do something of that scale in every state, again, you don't have to solve every issue. You're literally never going to be able to do it. You have to pick one thing and you have to find your people. And if we do that in each state, if we're capable of making a change of that magnitude across the country, the problem resolves itself. It's literally that simple. So that would be my recommendation to those of you listening. If you want something to do for Patriots Day, before the next one rolls around, make it your goal in this time span from this April 19th to next to pick one thing you're passionate about and try and figure out how you can spread that message to people in your community and maybe band together to see a change within the year. You might not accomplish it, but it's a hell of a good place to start.
That was so great. I'm glad you mentioned the people in South Dakota. That is truly a model for any of us, whether it be at the local, county, or state level, to rally, to get people up behind a unified cause, and just keep fighting, no matter how daunting or overwhelming the opposition looks. You get up in the morning, you put your boots on, you take care of your job, and you spend time organizing, talking, going to county meetings. And this is what it was such a wonderful time. And go back and listen to anybody who's on the podcast. Listen to this one. You can go back and listen to several that we've had with Jared and Mike and the other folks up in South Dakota. It's a tremendous way to push back. And the other point you made that I think was worth mentioning is the division. It is the intent of those in government and those in big media. By the way, they're both in bed, big pharma, big media, big government, big military industrial complex, to keep us feuding amongst ourselves, to have us pointing like this: black, white, gay, straight, religious, secular, Republican, Democrat. That's one of the biggest ones, and it's such a joke because they're all in the same camp, and it's to keep us enslaved. They keep us at each other's throat. Oh, you're a Democrat, I gotta be opposed to anything you say, or oh, you're a Republican, you're full of it, and nothing you say is right. They have done this. They have created these wedges and kept us apart so that we do not train our focus on those that have stolen from us and stolen our kids' inheritance. That is where we have to focus. And so, if you're, as you described, if you pick an issue that you do not want your community, your town, your county to be subject to, and you start gathering people and meeting and going and spreading the word, you can stop this oppression through peaceful means, which has been the whole intent of this podcast, to avoid what our forefathers told us is the last box to preserve what the blood of our forefathers have won for us. So we are here continuing to plead people to get involved, get engaged, and there are victories. We are able to see victories, and South Dakota is a shining example.
Yeah, for sure. And that should be our continuous motivation. Like, we can do it. People are doing it. Find those people and reach out to them if you have to. Hey, here's my thing. How do I even start?
Yep.
Because that's all you have to do is start, and that's the thing that most people aren't doing. They're just not taking the first step. They know they feel these things. They know they're angry. They know something needs to change, but they haven't just taken the first step because they don't know what the first step is. It doesn't have to be big. Don't let it overwhelm you. It can be one small thing, and just start. And once you start connecting with people who agree with you, it's gonna just grow itself. So yeah, I think this has been a great conversation, looking back to our founders and the original Patriots, the OGs of the Buckman Tavern. The thing we reference every single week. It's awesome to think back about what people were capable of then, and I really think there are so many people who are capable of that and more today, and it's just believing in that ability to do so and believing in the freedom that we're supposed to have here.
Yeah.
So,
well, I truly appreciate April 19th. I have some great experiences from April 19th, beginning in 2009 when I met with the founding of the Oath Keepers on the Lexington Green. So I have been there. I've been to the Buckman Tavern. I would encourage anybody who's up that way. But Saturday, on April 19th, please share the story of those brave men and women, the militiamen who gathered on that green and stood in the face of tyrants and began the long and drawn out and bloody conflict that won for us what we have allowed to slip away.
Yep. Exactly. Well, thanks, Pops. It was great. If you've got nothing else to add for the night, let's do the Bible verse.
Okay, I have a Bible verse tonight. Comes to us from Jeremiah. It says, "They will fight against you, but they will not overcome you, for I am with you to deliver you, declares the Lord." Jeremiah 1:19.
That is a great one, and another piece of inspiration to take with us into this Patriots Day and through the year.
Absolutely. Until next time, stay vigilant and have a great Patriots Day on Saturday.
That's right. And one more bit of information I forgot to squeeze in here through the episode. We are posting on YouTube now as well. So I need to get that on the website. But for anybody who prefers YouTube, you can find us there at the Fourth Box Podcast. I will share that link below. And yeah, like you said, until next week, stay vigilant.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate the support and truly love getting to share this message with anyone who wants or needs it. The best way for you to support the show is to subscribe, add a rating, and share with everyone you know. You can find us on Instagram, X, and at thefourthbox.com. We'll see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Stay vigilant.